sometimes lay awake at night dreaming of oil barrels around my head. It's hard not to when you see basically the rest of the prospects we've got. So we've got, this is the whole Rift Basin. This is that little sub-basin that I talked about, the Lokichar sub-basin, which is roughly the same size as the Albert Graben, and this string of pearls. Again, for you budding geophysicists, if you look along this line, this is the one we drilled, which is the Gamia structure. This is the one we're going to drill next, which is Twiga. Again, a nice rollover with bright spots. So we're just marching up this string of pearls. So we're going to take this rig, we're going to move it here, drill Twiga. We're probably going to move it up and drill Lady, and then we're going to come back and probably drill Kamba as our fourth well. So the idea here, right now, I think we're very close to pipeline volumes. I don't think I'm allowed to say what the actual volume we've discovered yet is until we have a third-party report. But the simple math is we thought it was going to be about 50 million barrels with 17 meters of pay. We got 6 times that much. So I'll let all of you do that complicated math. But, the pipeline volumes, coincidentally, are about 250 million barrels to justify a standalone development. So we think just with that upper section alone, we're pretty much there with a standalone development. But obviously exciting. Every one of these strings of pearls along here looks as good or better than the Gamia well we drilled. Some of them are bigger. Lady seems to be the biggest one. It's actually a big rollover at every level. So I think there's a lot of encouragement that this thing could be quite a bit bigger than it is. You know, if you start extrapolating the volumes and saying 80 prospects and leads and take any reasonable chance of success in there, you get to a very big number, a number so big that we don't like to talk about it in public because people start hiding the sharp silverware and don't want to be around us. We do have other types of traps. This is Kamba. So this is a tilted fault block trap that we really want to drill. The reason we like this is just size. We think this is one of the biggest prospects we've got. So this one will be on the this is not one of the string of pearls, but it's one that we think is going to be a very good prospect, and we want to drill that early in the schedule. Then we also, besides this southern string of pearls, we've got a whole northern string of pearls that runs up 10 BA and all the way up into South Omo. So structurally, this is a little bit different. This is where the Cretaceous trend intersects the tertiary trend. So you can see on this one, the structures look a little different here. They're more like tilted fault blocks, big grabens, and we think we've got kind of a complex structure at the intersection of these two trends, which is actually good news. We set up a lot more different types of traps. But Tullow still believes this is the sweet spot in the play, but we haven't drilled a well there yet. We will remedy that. One of the 2 rigs that's coming in now will come here. So in September, we'll have a rig in Ethiopia, and we'll drill across the border in South Omo. So we'll have a well at the very northern part of this trend. And if this hits, then I think we start thinking about that whole basin being productive, and that's when the numbers get big. So that's the tertiary trend. Obviously, we're going to spend about 75% of our budget on that. That's the one we made the big discovery, and that's the one we'll be focusing on. But we do have some other interesting plays in the company that we really haven't evaluated. The second one is this Cretaceous rift. So this is actually the same system as Sudan. I was here, I worked 2 years in Sudan in 1997 to 1999, where we found the Tharjath field. And the geology looks very similar going through from Sudan into Kenya. So this one is a little bit more risky, I would say, and the reason I'd say it's more risky is this is our prospect Pai Pai, and there's 3 dry holes right nearby. But what's interesting about those dry holes is that they have very thick oil staining. This well alone, Sirius, has 2,000 feet of continuous live oil staining. And what we think happened is basically in the late Cretaceous, early Tertiary, these were actually very big oil fields that were formed. And then when the Tertiary faulting that you see here came through, it basically reactivated these structures, breached them, and these fields leaked to the surface. And the reason I say that is, if you look at this seismic line, these are the old wells that were drilled by Amoco and Total in the mid-'80s. They're all tilted fault block traps, kind of similar to what you see in the North Sea. The blue is the Cretaceous, the orange and the yellow are the Tertiary, which is almost 100% sand. So what happened is, as these faults kept moving, the oil just spills across these faults into this sand. So when you juxtapose sand against these oil-bearing zones, it just leaks off and goes to the surface and escapes. So what we're looking for is an old structure like this that's never been faulted, never been breached. The theory being, if there was an old oil field here generated in the late Cretaceous, early Tertiary, it still should be there. So it's a bit risky. It's kind of what we call a concept well. You know, it's a valid concept, but without drilling that well, we'll never know the answer. So we are going to drill this well. The other rig that's coming will come here September 1st, and we'll drill this first. The good news of that is, if it does work, we've got 5 more prospects in this area that it kind of confirms, and we also have 7 more prospects in this area that it confirms. This block we own 100% of, including Kanyonga, which is the biggest prospect we've seen in any block in East Africa. Kanyonga, even for those that aren't geophysicists, you can see this, it's like a giant mountain under the Earth's surface. We think it's a 750 million most likely case and up to 1.2 billion upside case. So again, if we de-risk the play by drilling Pai Pai, this thing all of a sudden becomes very interesting and one of the best prospects in our portfolio. If we drill a dry hole in Pai Pai, this one doesn't look so good. And in fact, what we'll probably do is move our rig down and drill this gas well down in the southern part of the basin. We did make a gas discovery. The Chinese, we were partners with CNOOC, the Chinese company, and we made a 2.5 TCF gas discovery last year. And we got quite excited about it. We announced it to the market, and our share price complete flatline. Then the Chinese made a hash of trying to test it, couldn't get it to flow to surface. We announced an unsuccessful test. Once again, complete flatline on our share price. So the markets tell me they don't give a damn about gas in East Africa. But I have to say I do. 2.5 TCF is almost 500 million barrels of oil equivalent. And you're in a place that is just starving for energy. This is the Kenya energy demand. The big orange wedge there is basically the burning of wood. 77% of their energy comes from burning of wood, and they have essentially deforested the entire country. But right now they're importing diesel to burn in their power plants, which is not sustainable. So there is a great market for this. Gas is a lot of trouble. You need to build pipelines, you need to build a power plant, you need to identify end users, you need to get a gas sales agreement with the government. But this will have value, and I guarantee there's none of that value in our stock. So we will be working with power companies, with kind of gas marketing people like Challenge Energy to market this gas in the future. The third one I want to talk about is the Jurassic Rift, and again, this is the one that's really more tied closely with Yemen. This actually just opened up. This is the Gulf of Aden. It only opened about 12 million years ago, which almost yesterday geologically. These were actually continuous basins when these oil fields in Yemen were formed, and the geology is identical as you move across the Gulf of Aden. So obviously this is a more difficult place to work. Somalia, from a political risk standpoint, has a higher level of political risk. We are working in northern Somalia in a place called Puntland. There's another province here called Somaliland. These are very much more stable parts of Somalia. We have worked here. We've shot seismic. We've drilled our first well. We're about to drill our second. Security is very high, and we pay a lot of attention to it, but it is a place we believe we can work. The overall stability of Somalia has been obviously very difficult in the past, but for the first time in 20 years is starting to show signs that it might be improving. There's a new constitutional committee that's been meeting. They're trying to establish a federal system in Somalia where they're basically the 3 autonomous regions and are federated under a constitution. So there is more political risk here, but the geology is quite compelling. We have spun this into a separate vehicle called Horn Petroleum. The reason we did this was to help finance it. It was a little more money than Africa Oil wanted to put in, The wells together, the two wells we're drilling are going to cost somewhere around $75 or $80 million. So we put $10 million of our cash in and the assets into a shell, raised $31 million in the market. We've just raised another $15 million this week to cover the cost overruns from the first well and to provide for the testing of hopefully both wells. So Horn's had a very rocky share price history. I don't quite understand it all the time. It's one that, you know, I wake up in the morning and I see it's gone up 30%. I have no idea why. I call the rig to see if there's anything going on. It mostly seems to be driven by rumors. This past week I put out a press release, which I thought was actually a positive press release. You know, I wrote it, and you know, I said, I reiterated that we found what we thought was a pretty nice oil field, and then I said, and we've also found something in the Jurassic that I think is quite interesting. So I saw it as what we had before plus something interesting, and our shares price went down 50%. So I don't quite understand the market on Horn. There seems to be a lot of rumors. If you look at the rumor mill, when we first drilled the well here on Shabil, we drilled down and saw some shows in the Upper Cretaceous, and even before we announced anything, there were people driving up and down the streets in Basaso firing machine guns in the air, and the president got on the radio and said, "This is the next Saudi Arabia." So it's very hard to manage expectations here. Somalia hasn't had a lot of good news in the last 40 years, really, and I think they see this as really the hope of the future. So the people are very supportive. You know, we've got all the local tribes, clans that we're working very closely with. You know, we'll have spent $95 million by the time we're finished drilling these wells on seismicking 2 wells, which is more than the rest of the world combined has invested in northern Somalia over the past 10 years. So I think we have a very strong local following, and I think, you know, we are where the pirates are. Puntland is where the home base of the pirates, and I think the reason the pirates are there is because there really is no other industry. You know, last year, $250 million was paid out in ransoms by insurance companies to ships. The second biggest industry in Puntland was $19 million in livestock that they export to the United Arab Emirates. So it is the only industry, and we hope that if we can bring oil to northern Somalia, that there'll be something else that another industry that people can get involved and invest themselves in. So again, what we like to hear in the geology is a big Jurassic source kitchen. One old well here called Darren 1 that had good oil shows, showing Jurassic source rocks. So we came in and drilled this well, Shabil. Nice 4-way dip closed anticline, and now we're moving the rig and moving it to Shabil North. But what we found in that well, we drilled through a very thick, tight carbonate section. Then we found some nice sandstones here, about a 200-meter zone that had about 12 meters of what looks like net pay. It had good shows, oil shows, gas shows. Petrophysically, these green areas here are where we think we have oil pay that should flow oil to the surface. What we don't have is actually a test of oil. So when we put in our press release that, you know, it's not really a discovery until we flow oil to the surface. You know, what I told Lucas Lundin was, I have tested oil from wells that have significantly worse indications than this well, but I've also tested water from wells that have significantly better indications than this well. So with oil wells, you need to flow oil to the surface before you're 100% sure. All the logs and all the studies can't tell you whether this is going to flow oil. My personal opinion, and the opinion of our technical staff, is there's probably a 75 or 80% chance that when we test this, it will flow oil. So what we're doing is moving this rig over here. We're going to drill the same prospect just into this Gisoma, which looks like the best reservoir, and we'll be able to test that well with the tools we have on location. Unfortunately, we don't have tools on location that can test this in the existing well. It's a 12¼ inch hole. We don't have, it was shallower than we expected. We expected the main reservoirs to be down here. This is where I reported in my press release that we have a 3 or 4 meter section which had oil in it. Looks interesting, but probably not thick enough to be commercial. So this is where we are planning to test. We have to import perforating guns basically to test this because it's behind casing. So the problem is perforating guns take